Hi everyone, Hulkany Smash Tano here. The internet's better than that. And it's time for the most painful segment on this channel, the Why You Know Review, where I go over a series of records that I didn't get a chance to review in full with a formal review this past month, so I'm just going to talk about them in brief with a bunch of short, biased opinions in this video right here to sort of make up for it in some kind of way. It probably never does. You guys probably come away from this video more pissed off than you do pleased. But hey, that's okay. We don't always get what we want. This is the latest record from this experimental hip-hop music producer, and I did enjoy his last record, Breakthrough, quite a bit. But this new album over here, I'm not really enjoying the change of pace too much. It seems like the Gaslamp killer is drifting away from some of the experimental textures and loops that he used to work with, and instead is trying to come together with some kind of mix of jazz fusion, hip hop, with like a lot of live instrumentation, what sounds like live instrumentation mixed in there, which on paper sounds really fantastic. Like, that's a pretty ambitious undertaking, but the actual execution here is really mild and underwhelming and kind of boring. Like, the performances aren't that good, neither is the playing a lot of the time. Like, it's super mediocre, like, playing as far as jazz standards. There's nothing like, super flashy or colorful or exciting about it. So while he does kind of pull together these influences in a way successfully, and he does create at least a vibe that embodies hip-hop and jazz together at the same time, there's nothing really that entertaining about it beyond that. The collaboration that nobody wanted, but God, did they try to make it work. The end result here is just like, I don't know, it's like they tried to come together with a quirky blend of rap, pop, and rock music, not too unlike the Gorillaz at some points, but way less well written and performed. There are some points where I'm pretty amazed at how aggressive the RZA goes on his verses, but a lot of the time the album just ends up feeling awkward and goofy and just totally out of place. Like, so many different sounds that don't complement each other, all happening on the same song. It's a mess, and only something I would recommend you listen to if you're a hardcore fan of RZA and Paul Banks, and even then you probably won't enjoy a great deal of what's on this record. It's gonna be more of like a morbid curiosity for you, I think. Man, Against Me really did it on this one with a series of mild attempts at trying to make punk music and then a bunch of middle-of-the-road pop rock sounds that they sound really awkward trying to mimic. I'm not really sure what the takeaway from this album was. Sure, it sounds a little better than some of the moments in the 2000s when the band was trying to keep up with the pop-punk Joneses, but now they're just completely without a direction on this record over here, as they really just kind of buffet pick, like, oh, let's do a little power pop, let's do a little bit of throwback rock and roll, let's do a little bit of this, let's do a little bit of that, and a lot of it doesn't really sound that great. On top of that, the vocals, which are usually a focal point for Against Me's music, super passionate, super exciting, super electrifying, very much not the case on this new record over here. Just as middle of the road as almost everything else the band is doing on this record. Ugh. Rap legend and one of hip-hop's true eccentrics comes through with a new LP over here, which shouldn't be too surprising because he's super prolific. He's always dropping something. But that being said, the feature list on this thing is incredible. People from Slug to MF Doom to Necro are on this thing. The beats are super grimy. This thing to me reads like an alt-rap record that if it had dropped on Stone's Throw Records like 10 years ago, it would have been labeled as a classic. Still though, a lot of the lyrics are pretty meat and potatoes for Kool Keith. A lot of the beats are super skeletal and stripped back to the point where it's kind of a turnoff. And a lot of the choruses on this thing are terrible. Not a whole lot of song structuring either, as like there's not really much tension or build up to the introduction of a lot of these guests on these tracks. They just kind of happen in whenever they happen to pop up on the track. Given that Usher was in a position to really make an album on his own terms this time around, like, there's really no harm in him experimenting and trying new things and really venturing out at this point in his career, this album ended up way more generic and commercial than it should have. I thought he'd really kind of take a few risks on this thing, but the few moments where it seems like he does that, he just kind of does like a little bit of a throwback R&B and synth funk thing, which comes off super bland and unentertaining. Yeah, bad album, not good. The worst thing is this album in a way kind of makes Usher sound like a relic, when it was only 10 years ago that he was dropping chart toppers. He just sounds more irrelevant than ever on this new album. Jack White, Acoustic Recordings, 1998 to 2006. With an album title like that, how could you go wrong? Seriously, like, Jack White is giving you acoustic cuts of some of his best songwriting over the past 10 years or so. It's good, you know, and what makes this album good is kind of self-explanatory, you know, which is why I'm not really reviewing it in a formal review, but I am recommending it, making sure it doesn't slip by you guys, because this is a good collection of gems, acoustic gems from Jack White, and unfortunately one of the better records he's dropped in a while, as I think a lot of his recent solo efforts have not really been that consistent. This is a very good, you know, kind of detour for him to release, because it's going to please old and new fans alike. I was pretty hyped for this record, but unfortunately it's just not as entertaining as their previous album. It seems less dynamic this time around, their sound and the album itself. Like, every single song is subject to the same kind of flat, distorted, saturated, sort of lo-fi, sort of shoegazy, pop punk, noise punk sound. It's very catchy a lot of the time. I do like the performances and the writing on this thing, but it seemed like there was more sonic diversity across the tracks on the last record, whereas this new one over here is super uniform to the point where it just gets old after a while. I mean, while there is a particular sound to these tracks, I wouldn't say it's a particularly good sound. I think it's kind of a restricting sound. It takes away a lot of the body of the vocals, of the guitars, of the drums, and makes everything a little burnt out, in my opinion. Hoping that the band can sort of come through with a sonically lush and texturally rich album on this next record, but with a more high fidelity recording that doesn't just kind of smudge the band's instrumentation together in a sort of unpleasant way. Tom really shoots for the stars on this one and tries to make his pop record. Not that he hasn't been dabbling in pop music before, but this is truly like his pop record. He has drifted completely away from that whole alternative R&B, PBR&B label that has been thrown at him so many times. A label that probably wouldn't be where it is today, you know, a sound that wouldn't be where it is today, if not for his early releases under the How to Dress Well name. Still, though, the results as he pursues this new, brighter, more upbeat sound are super mixed. Really inconsistent album, unfortunately. Boring. Thanks for the meme, though. The melon meme is a good meme. Good meme. These guys can pen a decent tune, and they can certainly channel that whole 90s indie rock sound and vibe thing. They're obviously huge fans of Pavement. But they're still yet to come through with a sound, a style, a vibe of their own. I still don't know a Cymbals Eat Guitars song when I hear it, to be completely honest. Like, I still cannot pick this band out of a lineup, and I've heard every album they've come out with up until this point. And they're on their 4th record. If by your 4th record you can't settle on or sort of develop a sound that people can remember you for, I don't know, what's going on? You know, I mean, really, I'm at a loss. You know, I think there are some good elements to what the band is doing. Again, in terms of songwriting, and I think the performances are good, and the vocals a lot of the time are pretty passionate. But still, at this point, I just feel like I'm listening to a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's not really that interesting. I have never cringed this hard at the Antwoord record, and I plan on never sort of listening to one of their albums again, because this was truly terrible. Lyrics were awful. Production is easily some of the muddiest and worst on their entire discography. Sounds like it was recorded on a potato. I've never really been a huge fan of this band, but I can at least appreciate and admire the fact that they went for a more lo-fi and raw sound this time around, instead of just kind of, you know, washing their sounds away into the dreamy aesthetics that their previous records exhibited. But having said that, this record just kind of came off really sloppy and just bad presentation, in my opinion. Not really the vibrant and colorful sounds from their last albums. Still, though, obviously that was the intention here to make something that was a little bit more rough around the edges, I suppose, but without sort of that, I don't know, sort of dreamy barrier between the listener and Warpaint. It just kind of reveals that there's a real lack of fundamentals to the songwriting and the performances on this thing. The album a lot of the time just sounds like a big mess, and whoever produced this thing, I would not invite them back to produce my band's album again. New record from Every Time I Die. I've never really been a huge Every Time I Die fan. Like, they've never really made a record that I thought was so fantastic I was head over heels for it, but they're far from being one of the worst metalcore bands out there. You could do a lot worse by metalcore standards, but still, even today, there's like nothing really about the band's style or songwriting or really anything that like really excites me. You know, I guess metalcore is a genre that I either like to be so brutal that I'm just kind of like, you know, blown away by the brutality, or, you know, I enjoy the more sort of progressive and experimental and noisier bands like Converge and the like. Every Time I Die just kind of sits in this weird middle ground that doesn't really excite me or entirely bore me. You know, I certainly understand people continuing to enjoy the band's music. It's great that they've been able to sort of carry on all this time without certainly selling themselves short artistically or totally selling out and just kind of making like, you know, crappy generic scenester, fake-ass emo music and that kind of shit. So, you know, they're going strong with the sound and the style that they've been rocking for well over, you know, a decade at this point. And it seems like there's no sign of them slowing down soon. So, you know, amen to them, you know, for continuing to go forward and sort of keeping the torch burning. It's just not burning for me, that's all. I think this commercial debut kind of proves that Mykki Blanco is a more interesting figure than she is actually a voice or an artist or a performer, because a lot of the lyrics, and I do enjoy that song with Woodkid, a lot of the lyrics, the singing, the rapping, the instrumentals on this thing are awful. If any other artist had put this record out, they would like, you know, be getting reamed over how bad this album is. But in my opinion, there's not really too many good things about this record. It's just super sloppy, super lazy. Again, a more interesting figure than a voice. I admire what Mykki Blanco is doing. You know, it seems like she inhabits a very unique corner in music today. But as far as like the art that is presented on this album, it's very mediocre. It's okay. It's all right. Musician, have you given any of these albums a listen? If you did you love them? Did you hate them? What would you rate them? You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like. If you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry if you hate my thoughts on any of these albums, which you most likely do, probably at least a couple of them. All right. Hope you guys are having a good one. Eat your fruits and veggies, drink some water, stay hydrated forever.